Welcome to the Tripod NFL Playoffs Preview Extravaganza. Who's talking right now? It's Winny. I'm here joined by Neddy from Neddy Given Sunday. First ever time we're doing our preview in vertical video format, and we are live on Instagram right now, I believe. Let us know if you can hear us and see us, guys. Please interact with us. Let us know your Super Bowl predictions straight off the bat. Neddy, happy birthday to you for Friday, mate. And thanks for joining me tonight to talk about the playoffs ahead.
Pleasure, mate. Wouldn't want to be anywhere else on this first week back of work on a Wednesday than right here.
Yeah. Where else would you rather be? Thank you to everyone who is joining us. And we will put your comments up on the screen, including if it says Facebook user, it means it's like keeping your identity private because you might be watching us within the Tripod Facebook group. Shout out to Dobbo who's saying Steelers all the way. Not so sure about Steelers. Now, we're going to talk plenty of playoffs. What are we going to do? We're going to look back at the season. We've got a market insight from Tristan to tell us where the action's been. We're going to go team by team, strength, biggest weakness, and like who we want to bet on versus against overall. And then game by game for the 6 super wildcard playoff matchups, and then overall kind of Super Bowl predictions and overall playoff special predictions, because there's plenty of special markets you can back certain teams or players for the next kind of month of football where they're playing for all the marbles. So, Neddy, rapid fire, I want you to go through who you believe should have won the major awards. So I'll throw each award at you and you give me kind of who you had, maybe a one-liner. MVP.
I will go with CMC.
Really? I'll elaborate a little bit.
Okay, just because I love him, he's my guy. No, I think it will be Lamar, but it'd be awesome to see a running back considering all the slack that they went through in the offseason before this season started.
So you believe he really was the most valuable? Like you take Lamar off the Ravens, you take CMC. Like I still feel like
no, because it'd probably be Trent Williams if that was the case.
Yes, well that's true, and that's part of the thing about 49ers. Who is the MVP? You got Williams. Like they were a different team once Deebo Samuel came back. Obviously, you got Kittle, and then Purdy was like $1.40 to win the award before he kind of messed the bed against the Ravens, which handed it to Lamar. Ravens are a 1 seed. You can't argue too much. I'll give it to him, and I think Dak is hard pressed. I think he had an awesome season. Probably finishes second. Unfortunate for me because I did back him and share it on another pod at $21, and I'll get second place there. Defensive Player of the Year. Who you got?
That's just going to be TJ.
You got TJ, led the league in sacks a third time. And even though I actually have money on him, I think it's Myles Garrett. I think it goes beyond just sacks. I think Garrett is double teamed more often. I think he's got a higher win rate. And I think the Browns had the best defense all season. And it's even things he did on special teams like blocking field goals. I thought he's an absolute weapon. And I'll elaborate a bit more on that when we talk Browns. Offensive Rookie of the Year, no surprise, right?
Yeah, Puka. No, I'm obviously a Stroud boy for sure. Stroud boys stand up, but I mean, Puka Nacua has been unreal as well. Like you can't take that away from everything that he's done. If Stroud didn't have
by a receiver.
Yes, most by rookie and most receiving touchdowns as well by rookie as well.
Yep, and I give you credit because you said you got all your Carolina apparel behind you. You would have liked Stroud.
It would have been nice.
Few months ago. I don't want to bring your energy down, so I don't want to talk too much about that. Defensive Rookie of the Year?
I played this one at the start of the year, and I know Matty put this one out as well. Will Anderson, and he's played it at the same price as what I played at the start of the season. I think it went up to $13, and now it's come back down to $5 and even lower. So yeah, Will Anderson for me.
Do you think he deserved it?
Yeah, I do. And you can see there's a lot of statistics when he is and isn't on the field. Same as when he was hurt and he was off, their defense sort of struggled a lot more. He's not that sort of same Myles Garrett or what do you call it, Von Miller when they came out of college where they were just massive and then just absolute freaks of nature. But I actually think he's played really well.
I could give it to Kobe Turner, who kind of came out of nowhere for the Rams. But Jalen Carter was the prohibitive favorite for most of the year. But as the Eagles cooled off, it opened the door. Maybe Will Anderson gets it. But that's a contentious one, as is Coach of the Year. Came down to the final week too. Again, Undertaker tipped at 15s. Stefanski is into like $1.15. And the Undertaker, if it loses, it's his fault because he early crowed it. Who do you have? I will still say Stefanski deserves it based on having 5 different starting QBs, O-line injuries, lost Chubb, brutal injury. But there's a good case to be made for the Texans head coach too.
Yeah, me personally, I think it's very hard to knock the first year head coaches. They seem to win this one a lot. D'Amico Ryans went well and truly over his win total. He went from last place to first place in that division. And yes, not as good division as the AFC North. And Stefanski did have to deal with a lot, like not discrediting that whatsoever. But my main thing for me is that the best unit of his team, he just had nothing to do with, which was his defense on that one. He's still done an amazing job. And yes, cycling through the quarterbacks and the injuries, like it's offensive line injuries as well. They've just been absolutely hammered. Done a great job. But yeah, I think D'Amico Ryans is going to be tough to beat in that one.
That's fair. You could argue Jim Swartz is the coach of the year in that regard. And then I was going to ask you offensive player of the year, but if you think McCaffrey deserves MVP,
CMC.
then you go him. Of course, Tyreek Hill had an incredible season too, but I also would have gone CMC. Now, moment of the season, I don't know where you're going to go with this, but does one moment stand out that was your most memorable or favorite moment?
My favorite one.
Favorite moment of the season.
Yeah, it probably would have been at roughly around 7:30, 8 o'clock on Monday when the Carolina Panthers stopped playing and I didn't have to watch them anymore. That was probably my favorite part of this whole season. But for me, there was a player that we bet on, well, I bet on a lot, was Jahmyr Gibbs, and watching him play every week's phenomenal, man. Like, he is just water, he is fluid. And seeing some of these teams come through that way and turn things around is always fun. Like seeing the Texans, super fun to watch them play week in, week out. Detroit, obviously, the way that they can just smash people and pass the ball. Just seeing some of the changing of the guard. Like, we had the Tom Brady's, the Roethlisbergers, all those guys for so many years. And now we've got so many good young stud quarterbacks coming through. That sort of stuff excites me.
Gibbs was kind of what Atlanta fans were hoping Bijan Robinson could have been this year. Maybe he would have if he got the ball a bit more often. They're going to have to find a new coach, as a few teams are. And I might ask you that kind of stuff, the coaching merry-go-round at the very end. If people are interested, we can really get into the weeds. For me, moment of the year, the moment that came to me was one of the most epic games was, I think it was like the late afternoon window when Philly hosted the Bills and that crazy game, and it was pouring rain and Philly was buried and they were down 10. They come back and Elliott hits the 58-yarder when they get in range on the final play of regulation, in the rain. Like, what's the odds that kick's going in? And it gets to overtime. And once again, Josh Allen loses in overtime. This time it's on a Hurts touchdown. And at that point, Philly was rolling. They were navigating the toughest part of their schedule. And the Bills were nearly buried. We pretty much said that it wasn't going to be their year when they couldn't win that game. I think a week or two later, there's that famous play, which is my other kind of moment of the year, where Kelsey laterals right to Kadarius Toney. It looks like the Chiefs are going to come back and beat the Bills. And out of that game, all the conversation was around what a mess the Chiefs are and how the wide receivers are letting Mahomes down. And what we kind of buried the lead, which was that the Bills were revitalized in that game because they didn't lose another game after that overtime loss. The Bills come in now as a 2 seed with a very real chance to win the whole thing. So a couple of my most memorable games this year were crazy games involving the Bills. You got any kind of memories of those ones?
No, those ones were crackers, man. And I think the fallout as well after with the Kadarius Toney being offside one as well, you love that one, and hearing all the Chiefs fans just cry crazy after that one. That was pretty memorable and fun to watch the downfall of that. But
that's right. And the argument, should it have been a flag and whatnot. And obviously, there's always great debate and discourse around the NFL. And in the playoffs, it won't be any different, and there'll be a lot of questionable decisions and questionable play calls, and we love it. We're here for it. Now, have a breather, get yourself a beer, mate. Everyone, let's have a listen to Tristan. He's going to come on and join us and just let us know where the action has been this season and for week 1 of the playoffs.
G'day everyone, Tristan Merlehandy from Top Sport. We're getting very close to the NFL playoffs where they kick off this week, and we've got a really exciting Super Bowl run where the 49ers are the favourites. They have been for most of the season. They are the $3 favourites, with Baltimore there at $4, Buffalo $7.50, Dallas at $8, and Kansas. They've had a very up and down season, but you never know what Mahomes can do at $11. Our worst ways by a long way are the 49ers. We've been laying them through multis and basically at each price point from when they opened the season, which they opened it at, what price have we got here? They opened it at $10, got out to $12, and then have been firming up most weeks despite that loss they had a couple of weeks ago to Baltimore. The other ordinary results for us are Kansas City, which we laid at $6.50, and the Philadelphia Eagles at around that $7 mark. So they have both drifted, and a few of the other sides have been well backed. One of the teams that's gone on a little bit of a run lately has been Dallas. They're into $8, and there's been good support for them over the last week or so. Just having a look at the AFC and NFC, the Baltimore Ravens are the $2.20 favourite. They were $4 or $5 not that long ago, and the other side, obviously on the NFC side, is the 49ers, where they're $1.77. Our worst way by a significant margin in that market's actually Detroit, where we laid them at the start of the year at $11. So they've tightened up a little bit now, but they've got to obviously get on a run to claim that title. The wildcard matches this weekend, we've got a couple of short price favourites in both Buffalo and Dallas, and then we've got a couple of good games as well. The Detroit Rams game's obviously going to be a good spectacle with Matt Stafford going back to Detroit after all those years. So looking forward to seeing how it plays out. I don't know. I'm my little tip for the Super Bowl. I think it's a very open affair, but I don't mind Buffalo or Dallas. I think both of those are getting on a little bit of a run and might be able to make a charge. But obviously, the two teams at the top of the market are the class outfits at the moment. Good luck if you're having a bet over the NFL playoffs, and of course, gamble responsibly.
Mate, moment of the season too just has to be nearly every week cashing the 2 out of 3 ain't bad with Toppy. And you tell me where the credit's got to go. Obviously, you've got a hand in that every week. The Undertaker, we had Barney. Did we have Padonis lending a hand with some of these?
Yeah, I think Padonis threw one in 1 week, but he's been pretty quiet because that chat goes absolutely bonkers, as you can imagine, with Maddie and Barney in there all the time. I know a lot of the time I sort of go quiet from Tuesday to Friday and then just let them do their thing. But yeah, absolutely. Barney and Maddie are just they're geniuses at it. I was actually poking fun at them this morning that they're almost of one mind because a lot of the times they'll throw out the same person almost at the same time and collectively. So this season as a whole, we actually went 13 winners, 6 losers, and we're up over 22.5 units on that one. It's been absolute fire, and it's actually been a lot of fun. I know last week was sort of up, last year rather, we're up and down with it, but this year we wanted to run there for a while that it was just hitting, and it was hitting so early. Like I think we cashed all 3 legs within the first half of the first quarter, 2 weeks in a row. So it was pretty fun.
That's unreal, man. I think people can remember the legendary mixed matchup year. We debuted that 2021. We went 70% for a season and average winning odds over $2.50. You're right in the same territory. I mean, you're winning, more than 2 out of 3. Which say 13 and 6. So you're close to 70% as well. And average winning odds would be right around the same. Would be around
it'd be pretty close. We've had some monster ones in there. I think our biggest one might have been around $4, but majority of them sort of hover around that 2.5, bit over 2.5 range.
And if people don't know how it works, you pick 3 players. It's for an anytime touchdown, but you just need at least 2 of them to score anytime for the bet to win. And you will carry that on through the playoffs as well, so people can look out for that. It's under the gridiron markets on Top Sport. If you need a Toppy account, Tripod is the code. Let's jump into the
Some
AFC.
people have usually asked about this as well. Some people have asked about it when it pops up. Like some weeks, and now that we have the games that pop up on Sunday here, it's more than likely going to be Saturday. But I'll always post it now because I noticed some people are missing it. So I'll always post it within the Tripod forum, so that way everyone knows it's up. But before the games start, it's going to be there. I promise you that. Yeah,
look out for that because, of course, there's games on Sunday now for the next couple of weeks in Australia. So we're going to go game by game, but I just want to talk about the teams, including a side that's not playing this weekend, but we're just going to go through the conferences and by seed. And I asked you to give me kind of biggest strength and biggest weakness for each of these sides. So Baltimore Ravens. And feel free to contribute your own thoughts at home as well, guys, in the chat. We'll put them up on the screen.
So for them, their biggest strength at the moment is just the team as a whole. And I sort of noticed it, I think it was 2 weeks ago. I was watching them play, and even just you see Lamar on the sideline, like everyone, all the receivers like Odell and Flowers are dapping themselves up, and the defense is hooting and hollering and stuff. But you see Lamar sitting on the sideline, and he seems focused, and that just seems like a good core. And he's got that whole town eating out of his hand at the moment. He's not worried about his contract. He's playing full noise. But the weakness of that team, and that's something that I could touch on a little bit later here as well, is actually their run defense. And there's a lot of teams in the AFC, and if they were to come up against the 49ers in the Super Bowl again, I think that's actually a massive weakness, and that is something that a lot of teams could attack successfully.
Yeah, it definitely feels like Lamar is going to be dialed in because it's like a Super Bowl is the one thing that's missing on his resume, and really playoff success and playing in a Super Bowl. Got the MVP, probably going to get a second one. Amazing stats, the highlights, the contract, but he knows that his team has a great opportunity. And one of the big reasons is that bye week, that number one seed, we saw it last year, the two number ones ended up meeting in the Super Bowl because this time of year, not only to get a rest in week one of the playoffs and not have to do battle this weekend, but Baltimore got to rest all the important players last week as well. So, they're going to be fresh, and there's so much attrition in this league. I'll jump to weakness. I mean, I think the loss of Mark Andrews, although Lively's done so well, that's still a big loss. Likely, sorry?
Isaiah Likely, yeah.
Like, what am I thinking? Blake Lively. And Mitchell too in the backfield. That's a couple of your biggest weapons. But Lamar is such a weapon on his own, and it's a physical defense. You're right that the numbers against the run might not be great, although of course we saw what they did when they went into San Francisco on Christmas Day. So they're idle for now, but they're definitely the team to beat in the AFC. Moving to the Bills, I get your thoughts, but straight away I've got to shout out Barney. He's probably watching right now, but if he's in the group, we won't see his name pop up on the screen. As Tom says, whispers Andrews could make it back. Do you know what the injury was? I thought he was out for the season.
I think when it initially happened, there was like things that, he could make it back, but it would be possibly Super Bowl, if anything, at extreme best. But honestly, Mark Andrews is awesome, but I think Likely's been playing great, and that bloke finds open space like no other, and he's very silky smooth.
Now, moving to the Bills, guy that is also silky smooth, Barney. Tipping, I know he's a bit biased, but tipping Buffalo at $41 about 6 weeks ago. There was a really great discussion in the group around that tip. I mean, people will always bag you when you tip like a super long shot because it's easy to say, oh, that's got no chance, oh, they're terrible, and most likely it doesn't win, and you can say you were right. But we're all about finding value in the pod. But people made the case, well, $41 is not a great price because the Bills at the time were $4.50 to make the playoffs. And then you got to figure that when they get there, they're going to be like $2.50 plus at Miami. They're going to be $2.50 plus at Kansas City. They're going to be $2.50 plus at Baltimore. And they're obviously going to have to go through at least a couple of those destinations to get to a Super Bowl. And then you're going to be $2 or more probably in a Super Bowl. So you add it all up, it made more sense to just roll your funds. But little did we know back then, they weren't just going to get to a wild card. They ended up getting a 2 seed and get the division. And what are they? Like $1.20 or under this weekend. And obviously, if they play Miami, they'll be hosting them, And if they play Kansas City, they'll be hosting them and they'll be favorites again. So it's a crazy one where, although conventional wisdom was you very rarely get value in the futures and you're better off just kind of rolling your funds at the best available price. In this case, 41 was the best entry point on Buffalo. So I have to give credit to Barney there. And I did want to just kind of do an anatomy of that pick because I think it was quite fascinating. And it's always discussion for punters about how to get the best value about a team that you like in terms of when to buy and when to sell. And for everyone who's riding that, some have already cashed the $4.50 make the playoffs, which they secured when the Jags lost. Imagine if the Bills were do or die last week. I thought they were done in that fourth quarter. Again, we can talk about that when they were down 7. But here they are, a 2 seed. How did they get there? What's the biggest strength for you?
And even to sit before it kicked off last week, how they could go from either the 2 seed or not making the playoffs at all is insane. I can't remember ever seeing anything like that. But the strength of that team, that offensive line's playing really well. They're actually really healthy. I know they've got key people out like White that are injured, etc. And of course, Josh Allen. Like last week, we saw him against Miami. Probably one of the worst games I've seen him play in a long time. And as much as he is their strength, I think he very much could be their weakness as well. Like he is just a mash all the buttons player. It's like you're playing Madden and you just go, don't throw it, and you press it and you fucking throw it and then it gets intercepted. Like he will live and die that way, and that's the curse that you have with Josh Allen because he will make amazing throws, he'll make amazing plays, and it will be reckless. Sometimes it works. And they are a team that could easily go all the way. Just simple as that. But at the same time, they could get bounced because of just silly errors. Like they should have handled Miami a lot more handedly than what they did last week. And if it wasn't for that kick return, whichever one it was, that game was staying 14-all.
Well, they were down. No, they were down. That TD just
that put them up. Score. I thought that one put them up to 21-14, didn't it?
Someone fact check us. I'm just off my memory. That one leveled the game, and then they got the ball back and drove and got in front. But maybe you're right. Let us know. Either way, it's a 7-point game, and you did, you shot yourself in the foot multiple times, as you said. Allen, threw it away a couple of times, got strip sacked. Then they were a yard short of the end zone in the first half. Didn't get any points because they didn't have another timeout. So you're right. They left so much on the board. Weakness for me, I think, of course, is the fact that they can be turnover prone. But I think that's so well known. I don't think you bet against Buffalo going, I could get some turnovers here. That's factored in at this point. Everyone understands the deal. I think the bigger weakness is the defensive injuries, the guys they've lost along the way, that I'm not sure you can rely on them to stop somebody. Yes, they did actually hold really firm against Miami last week, but
Rasul Douglas has been unreal for him.
Yes, what a find. And you do Buffalo, of course, the dynamic offense, and you've got a QB, like you said, he can hurt you with legs and his arm, of course. They can get you, even though they didn't pick up the crucial short yardage. I feel like they are a good short yardage team because of that big body of Josh Allen. They can score with anyone in any game, which is a question mark over the 3 seed, the Kansas City Chiefs. Can they score with anyone, Eddie?
Yes, they can. Like, they're such a funny team that they've dropped off, and everyone keeps talking about the yips and how they just keep dropping the ball and their receivers suck and they're inexperienced, whatever. But for a large part of the season, they were winning different. They were winning through their defense, and Pat was just still playing smart ball, and they were running the ball really well. And then because they've had these drops, these embarrassing drops and these embarrassing losses, everyone's just throwing the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. They're still a great team. They're still probably the best coach in the playoffs at the moment, and they've still got the best quarterback. They still have a really good defense. I think they're still very scary as well. They could pretty much be a sleeping giant. Their weakness, everyone knows it. We're talking about it, is the inexperience of these receivers, of these other players. They've got a young core, young nucleus there at the moment, and they can make mistakes. It's more than just drops. It's lining off offside. It's 2 people in motion, getting lined up in the wrong spot, things like that. That could be the downfall of them. But again, it's still Andy Reid and it's still Pat Mahomes.
Thanks to Ben and Marcio in the comments correcting you, Neddy. I had it right. They were down 14-7, and they were receiving a punt inside their own 10, So, like, to even get that stop, but then they're backed up, but suddenly, you get 7, and then it changed the game, and then they finally got on track when they did have a positive drive and got up 7, and even then still had to survive that final Miami drive where they got the intercept. Moving to the Chiefs, of course, receivers, the weakness, but it is upside too, because if they can just have one good game, Mahomes is going to put the ball on the money. So if they can make a couple of plays, you feel like Kadarius Toney, a guy like him, or Rashee Rice. Like, Rashee Rice has actually had a pretty good year, but even these other guys that are much maligned, like, they can still make a play or two. And we'll get to that game specifically, but I definitely can't write off Kansas City. And I do love the side that can get rest, even though they managed to win in LA. They rested everyone important for the most part. So they come in fresh. They still get to play at home. Like, they didn't have a good year, but they still won the division by virtue of the rest of the teams being so uncompetitive. And they've got that defense, coaching, and experience for sure. And experience is something that the 4 seed Texans do not have. But what do you like about them?
Stroud, man. I love the offense. I love how he just pedaled to the metal the whole way. I do believe the weakness could, of course, be the inexperience of it, but we saw it last week, man. It was like a do-or-die game, and it didn't seem to phase him. Like, he wasn't airmailing too many things. Was it a perfectly crisp game for him? No. But the fact that he was still throwing off-platform, and these things were fucking laser beams. He's still down, obviously, Tank Dell, who is their number 1 guy. I think that's a massive loss for them. And I think them wanting to run the ball as much as what they are at the moment, they're not doing it successfully. Like, they were passing so well against the Colts all last game, and especially on early downs. But for whatever reason, they kept running and putting themselves in bad situations in 3rd and longs. I'm a bit cautious about Slowick's play calling when they're going to, of course, come up against the Browns. So that makes me a little bit nervous. But CJ Stroud, like, he can't be expected to bail them out all of the time. Like, yes, they had the injuries, and they had Nico Collins who went off, but that was the Colts defense, which is fucking pitiful. They were up against the big boys. So I think it might show that they are a bit inexperienced and they don't have the same sort of weapons. And yes, I'm worried about the offensive play calling.
I had the exact same word for their weakness. And the biggest strength I had is kind of fearlessness, that nothing to lose, and a brashness. And they're just a bunch of winners, and they're going to give it a red hot crack. Move to the 5 seed, the Browns, who the Texans will host. I've put their biggest strength is best defense in the league. Do you agree that is the best unit in the NFL?
Close.
Who are you putting up there with them?
Baltimore.
Okay. I'd take, I mean, that would be an awesome matchup. We're getting, not to jump ahead too much, but we're getting Stafford in Detroit this weekend. But next week, I think it's possible we could get Browns, Flacco at Baltimore. That would be cool.
Yeah.
In any case, you'd agree the strength of the Browns is the defense. Feel free to talk about that and where the weakness is on that side.
I know everyone's getting excited because they just remember Joe Flacco getting hot for the Baltimore Ravens when he took them to their Super Bowl. And yes, it's been good that he's reeled off a couple of wins as well. But like, you have a look at who they played. They played the Rams, got their teeth kicked in. They beat the Jags, nothing. Won by 3 against Chicago. They beat Houston without Stroud. They beat the Jets, and they beat Cincinnati. No, they lost to Cincinnati last week. Like, I don't think we should be able to get too carried away. Yeah, it's not exactly the best run of teams.
Everyone's like, oh, they've gotten hot. But if you actually look win by win, did they actually beat anyone strong? Yeah, 100%.
Exactly. And they're not overly impressive wins. And I mean, a win's a win. Whatever. Good on them for it. And Joe's playing relatively well. And again, there was a pass that I put on my show that he split just about 3 defenders an inch either way. That thing is a pick 6 and it's gone back the other way. And it ended up going to Amari Cooper, ended up being touchdown. So I think that could fall on their face. Again, the offensive line has been destroyed with injuries. Come up against the big boys in the playoffs. Offensive line injuries show out more than anything else.
I'm really interested on your take for them. That matchup this weekend against the Texans, but people have got to wait for that. A couple more AFC teams for us to discuss. Miami, who fell all the way down to the 6. We did already briefly touch on them. What do you call their biggest strength? And do you got any info on kind of where Jalen Waddle is at with regard to his availability?
Yeah, I haven't seen anything. Like, obviously, there's still him and Mostert. Their injuries, they're on shorter rest than everyone else. Like, they played against the Bills in, like, a very clutch, nail-biting game. And then now they get to go across to Kansas City as a reward for that one. Kansas City are very well rested at the moment. They're just walking to a buzzsaw here. But their weakness is, of course, the injuries at the moment, the fatigue at the moment. I feel like they're just running on empty. The plus, they have a very good head coach. They have a pretty good quarterback, and they have weapons galore if they can get onto the field. The fastest team. And they look great for majority of the season. I love what McDaniels was doing. It was forcing defenses to cover the whole width of the field and then some down there. So that is the positive. Of course, the offensive firepower. I don't know, for a while we were playing their total points, first half total points over for a lot of weeks at the start of the season, and you were never out of it. Like, if you needed 2 touchdowns with 2 minutes left, you were still sweet. You were still in the hunt for that one. So that's their positive. And like I said, negative, weakness, fatigue.
And that's why I mentioned Waddle, because if you have him and Hill, like, they can tear up, and then that offense can keep you in a game. But of course, I had the same point there about the defense, and I completely echo your thoughts on the fatigue and the petrol tank. But losing Phillips and Chubb on the D-line is brutal. The Steelers have an injury on their D-line that would also sink them, and that's if you gave them any shot to begin with. That's, of course, the knee injury to TJ Watt, the final quarter of the final game, where the Steelers had to win, and it was anyone's game against Baltimore, playing kind of second stringers. But Steelers are very lucky that Baltimore was locked into the 1 and didn't trot out the starters at home, or else Pittsburgh wouldn't be in the playoffs right now. They're here, and they do anything.
The positives to that team is Tomlin somehow managed to eke out wins despite negative point differentials. And Pickens, man, like, I was looking at him and I was talking to the guys the other day. Like, he has, I think it's maybe 20 or 30 yards less on the season than Jamar Chase, but it's like 30-something receptions more. Like, he's only got 60-something receptions and he's still well and truly well over 1,000 yards receiving. He's insane. He's a freak. And
he's an awesome run blocker too.
Yeah.
He really gets out of the box for everyone.
When he feels like it. But yeah, like for them, I don't know, like of all the teams that are in the playoffs, I don't know. The positive, it's the Steelers, and they find a way. They're lunatics. The negative,
I kind of put it there too. Yeah, they're gritty. They win ugly. Yeah. And sorry, other negative you got? Quarterback position? Same
thing. They're the Steelers. They can go up against teams that they should beat and they lose. It's just who they are. It's in their DNA.
And they're playing at Buffalo, so we're going to touch on that game. But obviously, Buffalo's just kind of carrying a lot of momentum in. Let's just switch straight across to the NFC and keep the same style 49ers, of course, won't play this weekend, but a chance to speak about their strengths. And they got any weaknesses?
Yeah, Baltimore, I guess. Yeah, the weakness for me, I would say, is still Brock Purdy. It's the weak link, and if you attack that weak link, I feel like things start to crumble. And we can talk about the Ravens 49ers matchup that happened previously. That game just got out of hand for them. Like, they're positive. They still have one of the best, if not the best, play callers in the whole NFL. And I think if he gets a second chop at Baltimore in the Super Bowl, I think it's going to be a completely different story. They're loaded across the park. This is the healthiest that they have been going into playoffs. Touch wood. Still a couple more games to go. I don't want to see McCaffrey in there playing quarterback, but they are locked and loaded, man. This team, this is their opportunity. No real massive weaknesses.
Yeah, and that's the scary thing, because I was also thinking weakness, and I said, well, Purdy, we haven't really seen him do it in the playoffs, because trying to think back to last year, I feel like they won one game pretty easily. I think it was Seattle, and then can't remember.
It was he ended up in that Eagles game, and it wasn't for long before
he got
hurt,
injured in the Eagles game, so you can't judge him. I'm just trying to think they must have won 2 games leading up. One, they beat Seattle fairly comfortably. I can't recall, but I just feel like he hasn't kind of been in a high-stakes playoff shootout. But the thing is, if we're going to say the QB might be the weakness of this team, and as I said before, he was $1.40 to win MVP in like week 15. So if the weakness of the team was arguably the MVP of the league, you're going into this year, you're like, oh, we don't know how good Purdy's going to be. He's actually been bloody good this year. So basically, that just shows what a juggernaut this side is.
Yeah, agree. And like Shanahan for a long time, like his bread and butter is what he does. He gets yak. He gets these explosive guys in space. So Purdy doesn't have to make these long throws. And when you have a look, man, Deebo Samuel, Ayuk, Kittle, CMC, that is a star-studded lineup and some of the best at every single position compared to the rest of the league. So it's made easy for him with an awesome play caller, but, like MVP, yes. Like he's playing better than I think what a lot of people perceive him to be playing. And then maybe just because he is Mr. Irrelevant, they're just like, nah, he doesn't have the same talent. And he doesn't. He doesn't have the Pat Mahomes, the Lamar Jackson, all that sort of stuff, but he's got the star-studded lineup. That's not his fault. And he knows the timing and the anticipation to be perfect in the Shanahan system, and that gets him out of trouble week in, week out without trying too hard. Yeah,
and I'm not saying he should have been MVP, but just that he was even in the discussion just speaks volumes. And, of course, like Baltimore, they get the rest, didn't even have to play anyone in week 18, and they get, obviously, the bye this week, home field throughout the playoffs. So it's really theirs to lose as someone from our group coaches. If he doesn't win this year, he never will. I mean, it's as good a shot as you ever can really ask for. And you talked about the weapons they've got in the scheme. So, of course, they are the team to beat in the NFC. The biggest challenger is probably the 2-seed Dallas Cowboys. Strength and weakness, Neddy?
Strength. Dak's playing good. They have the offensive weapons. They have the people on defense. Weakness is just McCarthy. I don't buy into it. He showed his colors again. This is what chased him out of Green Bay. He did it against Detroit the other week, where Detroit are known to have a very good run defense, and yet he ran on early downs just about the whole game. Whenever he passed, far more successful. And then when it came down to crunch time, when all he had to do was run, he decided to pass. Pretty much cost them the game. Then there was the Eric Decker eligible receiver thing, and all that happened, and all sort of got swept under the rug. He does this every year. And if he comes up against a good coach with a good team, if he chooses to run again, tries to get cute with Pollard, who hasn't had any success all season long, I love him, man. Like I think Dallas have great studs, but I think McCarthy's going to let him down, and then we just blame Dak Prescott.
And speaking of those studs, I mean, CD Lamb, people might not realize, like, he's one of the true superstars of the league at this point. So that connection, Dak and CD, that's scary. That can get you, get you a score whenever you might need it. So you've always got a chance when you've got such an electric offense. I don't know how tough they are. I think you're right. Like, Detroit got screwed. We'll talk about Detroit in a second. That's probably flipped home field if we do get 2 versus 3, which is the likely matchup in the divisional round. But in any case, we just talked about San Fran. I say Dallas's weakness is also ability to win away from home, particularly outdoors. I guess San Fran is the only place where that could occur, but it is fairly likely. You could probably say the same about the number 3 seed Detroit Lions. They got similarities to Dallas as well, but maybe not exactly the same strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah, their weakness is their defense at the moment, especially in the passing game. And when you have a look across the whole NFC, a lot of these teams, they can pass and they can attack. And even towards the lower ranked, we saw it on Thanksgiving, like the Green Bay Packers, who aren't the most aggressive, but they have a very good offensive line. If you're not getting pressure, you're going to get picked to pieces, and it's evident every single time. Like, we love the Lions. I love how aggressive they are. Dan Campbell gets them going. I love Gibbs and Amon-Ra and Laporta, who is now injured, and Jared Goff's playing awesome this season as well. But it's just that defense, especially the pass defense. Every other team in the NFC can light you up. It's going to be very tough for them, I believe.
Yeah, I love the personnel on Detroit, particularly offense. System works so well under Ben Johnson, but the Laporta injury is a big one. So, again, you've got to monitor that. And just having to probably win twice on the road because of that failed two-point conversion or the failed call. The 4 seed, sorry, my cursor is evading me there. The 4 seed is the Tampa Bay Bucks. Probably a lot of people didn't see that coming halfway through the year. But nevertheless, they get to host a playoff game. What do you like and dislike about Tampa Bay?
Not much at all, to be honest. But they're like, again, if you put them up against Detroit, Godwin's, Evans, those guys would have success against them. That would be a scary matchup. What do I like? As much as Baker Mayfield's annoyed the hell out of me over the years, like same thing. He's gritty. I got nothing, man. None of the NFC South teams should really be in the playoffs whatsoever. But unfortunately, the way that the rules are set up, one of them had to get in. I got nothing on them. I got nothing, truly.
And we'll talk about that matchup a little further, so you have to come up with a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, there's experience too, because they won the Super Bowl 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I should say, 2021 it was. Yeah, and they're a pretty consistent team, but I feel like there's a ceiling. There is a real ceiling on the offense and the defense, and they're not as elite as other counterparts. But it depends how you see that matchup in week 1, which we'll get to. They play the Philly Eagles, who are limping into the playoffs. Still got any strengths?
It's just so hard for me to rule them out. Like, I know injuries at the moment is killing them. And then we saw AJ Brown go down the other day as well, which is brutal, but I don't know. Like, it is so hard. Like, I would, if anything, and we'll talk about this later, I would want to back them more this week just because everyone just thinks they're just completely anemic, but there's still a lot of studs on there. And it's sort of a bit funny because after they lost to the 49ers, Nick Bosa came out and said, we've shown everyone the recipe to beat the Eagles. They've only won one game since then, so clearly they did show the recipe. But weaknesses, I think mentally, I think they're really scared about what's happening. You have a lot of aging players who will give it their all, like the Kelseys and all that sort of stuff. But they still star-studded, man. Like, it's still in them somewhere, and they still have that Philly oomph, you know what I mean? Like, if they get going and if they get hot and they turn it around, and all they need is just, I think, a little bit of confidence in themselves. Because right now, they're just reeling left, right, and center.
Yeah, sometimes you see a team kind of fall apart before the playoffs and then they exit unceremoniously and you kind of think, geez, that was an easy bet. Like, that team was shot for the last 2 months. Why didn't we bet them? But I also just can't bring myself to get out in front of Philly because I look at it still a really good offensive line, which means they can run it. They're only playing from 1st and 9 or 1st and 8.5 every set of downs. You got a QB that is going to elevate you in the playoffs because he will be willing to run it a bit more and be a bit more physical, in high leverage situations than he would be in a regular season where we know Hurts had a little bit of the knee, the ribs. Now he's got the finger. He's obviously just kind of limit damage through the season. But you get to this time of year, you're going to lay it all out there. And I would have said that wide receiver tandem, I love it. That's as strong as any in the league. But you got injury cloud over Smith as well as AJ Brown. The defense, which we came into this year saying they're stacked. What are they all? Half of them are ex-Georgia players, and they got Jalen Carter stealing the draft, and it was all great, but the production has really fallen off and on top of those injuries. So that's the weakness that I see.
And if you're making a panic move for Matt Patricia as well, like if you think like a defensive coordinator comes in, he's going to implement his own scheme, his own ideas, his own personnel, all that sort of stuff. You do not do that in the middle of the season unless there's someone sort of waiting in the wings that, okay, we've sacked you, you're horrible, step up. Don't bring someone from outside. That just stunk of a panic move that a team makes in an off season, not middle of the season and slowly push this guy to the side. Like, that is terrifying that they did that, and that is not a Howie Roseman move at all, which is, I think, is bizarre for them. And Matt Patricia has not been a good offense or defensive coach for a good couple of years now.
But this is the other thing. They started 10-1, so none of us questioned or remembered that they lost their offensive and defensive coordinator from the year before. So you would expect that that's going to hurt a team. As the Eagles have fallen, they still finished higher in the standards than the LA Rams, but going a much higher trajectory is LA. Do you like this team? They've got a chance. I mean, they're only a field goal underdog in wildcard weekend.
I do really like this team, and this one stands out to me, and this is Barney's gold as well. Like, I remember, I think we talked on the preseason one. He was talking about how the LA Rams, how their season win total was way too low, and 100% right. Soon as Stafford comes in, you remember that he is still one of the best quarterbacks, still one of the best arms in the NFL. Puka Nakua's come through, Kyron Williams, those guys are absolutely flying. I think they're going to give hell to anyone that they come up against offensively, of course. Defensively, I think there's still a fair few questions there. McVay's got the experience. Some of these guys have the experience. They're going to go balls to the wall as well. So I do really like them.
Yeah, they might not be too deep. I put that as a weakness, but I think when they got these four on the field together, Stafford, Kyron Williams, Kupp, and Nakua, that became like a top three, definitely undebatable top five offense in the whole league. And they all seem to be healthy at the right time. So again, when you can score and you're playing in a dome this week, you get the upset. You could get a divisional game against San Fran. They did meet a week ago, but that was meaningless. But you could get. I think that's the most likely. Well, is that right? If the Rams get an upset, they would be going to San Francisco. Just so people understand, it is reseeded, so it's not, the draw's not set. The lowest ranked winning team faces the one seed that is idle this week. So I'm kind of dismissing the next side, the Packers. I can't see them winning in Dallas. Not that it's impossible, but I don't see a lot of strength for Green Bay. Do you?
I kind of do, because I still like their offensive line. I think Jordan Love's playing relatively well. Like, is he going to hold up against the Dallas juggernaut? I don't know. Like, I think they've done extremely well to make it to the playoffs. Like, they're a rebuilding franchise, but they don't seem to rebuild. They just reload. And the fact that it's Jordan Love's first proper year here and all that sort of stuff, and he's coming and taking them there, I think that's something to hang your hat on and be very proud of. But that's just what fucking Green Bay do. Outside of that, nah, not really.
For me, they're a bit like Tampa. They don't really have any elite units. But when you've got a mobile QB and he's developing chemistry with his wide receivers, yeah, exactly. They don't have a great amount of experience. Look, for what it's worth, when I stand back, I feel more confident that Baltimore gets out of the AFC than I do San Fran winning the NFC, which is contrary to the odds. But I don't know, just me, I feel like Detroit or Dallas has a shot against San Fran. And I think it's just because those are teams that if everything goes right on the day and they play aggressive, and look, you've got to go for a fourth down here or there, whatever. But on the right day, Detroit or Dallas can score 31 points, I feel like. Could Philly beat San Fran in San Fran? Like, they played there already this year. No, actually, San Fran went into Philly and then smashed them. It'll be a tall task for Philly to reverse that and reverse the championship game from last year. But again, we're just not quite ready to write off Philly. So, I mean, who do you think is the biggest threat to San Fran getting Shanahan back to the Super Bowl?
In the NFC, well, I would say possibly. Yeah, I'd say it'd have to be Dallas then. It'd have to be Dallas. I love Detroit. I love Detroit, but their problems on the back end can get picked apart by anyone. And it was just the bad coaching of Dallas. It was just the bad
Dallas
coaching.
And Detroit don't play well outdoors, and that's exactly where you've got to beat San Fran, unless someone else upset them the week before. But that would be highly unlikely. We're going to go matchup by matchup, but being conscious of time, we're going to do it rapid fire. So you don't have to give me too much, but if you've got a lean or a like on these games and just like a factor that stands out to you about the matchup, let's go swiftly, and let's begin with Browns -2.5 at Texans.
Probably tease Texans up more than anything. I think there's going to be a few more points in this game as well. I think the total's 44-ish, I think, last time I saw. So I think there's going to be a few points in this. But, yeah, for me, I would lean more towards Texans personally.
I lean Browns because I think the defense can travel. Dolphins at Chiefs. Chiefs -4.
Chiefs. Haven't played it, haven't put it out, but Chiefs.
Dolphins running out of steam and could get steamrolled in this one. I agree. I could only play Kansas City, who are off the rest in week 18. Then, so that's the doubleheader Sunday Aussie time. Then we move to Monday morning in Australia. The early game is Steelers at Bills, Buffalo -10.
I would possibly lean more towards Steelers because this is meant to be a really, really horrible weather game. Like I dropped this one at 39.5. I think it's plummeted down to around 34 and it can possibly go lower. It's meant to be massive winds, rain, snow, just an absolute disaster. There's not going to be many points. So if the Steelers get anything at all, they'll probably cover the spread.
That's a good point to note because I couldn't see the Bills losing this. But if it's horrendous weather, you think back to that game where New England came in and beat them in a game where they only threw it 3 times. Extreme weather, anything that makes the game uglier definitely suits the Steelers. So I know people will be building multis, and I like quite a lot of the favorites this week. But yeah, you've got to be wary, especially if you want to lay the biggest spread of the week. Second biggest spread is the Dallas Cowboys -7.5 against the Packers. It sounds like you might lean to the underdog in that one too.
Not overly. Like I think the Packers, they can just play that sort of brand of football, but Cowboys at home, I would still lean that. It's just 7.5 is probably a little bit too rich for me.
Yeah,
that's probably another perfect teaser leg as well.
Yes, sure. So I do think the Cowboys are a pretty safe head-to-head if you're throwing in multis. Sunday night football, so Monday, kind of midday in Australia, is Stafford at Detroit. So this is fascinating. And the Lions are 3-point favorites to the Rams.
I love this, man. I love the NFL's script writers that they've brought Tyreek Hill back to Kansas City. They've brought, of course, Stafford back to Detroit. Goff against the Rams. It's great. I love it. This game's going to be fucking phenomenal. I would not be surprised if the Rams got up here, but I've been liking the Lions majority of the season. Again, haven't played anything on this one. I will probably, at 3.5, I'd probably lean Rams, but at the moment, probably lean a little bit more towards Lions.
Yeah, this one's a really tough one. I'm kind of split on this as well because I like the Lions players, and I think some of the Lions players are a little more unheralded. People know the Rams players because they won the Super Bowl a couple of years ago, but the Rams, I feel like the Rams can win this with coaching too. Like McVay, if anyone knows Goff, it's McVay. So he can really get in his bag and maybe pull the upset here. So do I favor kind of coaching versus just personnel? That's the battle here. Can't wait for that one. I've got a field goal spread in the final game, which is a Monday night football. So Tuesday in Australia, and the Eagles, despite the fact that they've limped into the playoffs, they are still a road favorite here. But who would you play if you had to?
That's insane, actually, that it's 3 on the road. I just haven't given up on Philly. I think they just find a way to eke this one out. Baker Mayfield was limping around a bit, and let's not forget, they were playing hard last week against Carolina, right? Like they were trying to secure the NFC South. They should have lost that game. Like Panthers had 2 touchdowns called back, and we had a missed field goal, and there was 9 points scored by the Bucs. All right, so if the Eagles defense can at least stand up a little bit, I do believe they make it hard for Tampa.
Yeah, I'd play Philly. I thought they would have enough, and they've been a bit embarrassed. But I feel like within the locker room, they still know they could have a bit more to give. And you look at last week, a lot of people will say that's the nail in the coffin, but they virtually had nothing to gain. When you figured that Dallas was going to beat the Commanders, it was a no-win situation for Philly. So although they played the starters, and I've heard people say, they were trying to win. You don't know the mentality, though. You don't know if they were just kind of going through the motions. So I won't write Philadelphia off. I lean to the favorite there as well. Have you had a look at any of the special playoff markets? I've got a bonus tip come into me from the Undertaker, but you can lead us off if there's any of those specials. I'm talking about, highest scoring team. There's several player props for the different statistics leaders throughout the whole playoff campaign. I'll get your Super Bowl pick in a minute, but any other special markets you like to look off?
Well, I had a look only because you told me that you're going to talk about this, and you can actually grab CMC, which will become a lot shorter as MVP around $11. All right, I found that one, and I've sort of touched on this one a fair bit. Yep. So you can get this one now because I just imagine this is going to become a lot shorter if they go on and make it all the way there, right? And if we imagine that they're going to get matched up against the Ravens, I've spoke about this plenty of times. So in that first matchup, right, the 49ers should have ran more. So what the Ravens actually do is they play with a light box, the second most of any team in the NFL, right? And therefore, playing a light box, which is not as many linebackers in there, you give up a lot of runs. And what San Francisco did is they actually passed a hell of a lot on that one. I think they're only getting 6.6 yards per attempt, whereas when they were running, they were getting 9.9 yards per carry. And the problem with Baltimore is when they try and resolve this issue and when they actually try and stack the box, they're actually the worst team in the NFL against the pass with a loaded box. So what San Francisco should have done is run heavy, bring the guys down, and that's when you pass. And I believe Shanahan's smart enough to know that, which means you'll get some CMC early runs, possibly early touchdowns if they match up again. That's the one I like.
Yeah, I was looking at my phone then because I was just trying to make sure I got the number right. Brock Purdy's the favorite on topic, and I agree with you. I feel like San Fran, the thing about betting Super Bowl MVP, you don't even know if your team's going to get there, but that's why you get better odds than you, of course, would on the day. But San Fran's favorites for the Super Bowl, I understand that. But you're right. I feel like CMC is more so established. She's going to finish higher in MVP voting than Purdy. And it depends how it goes on the day because if it's a bunch of passing yards and CMC is slightly contained. But you made the case there. I agree with you that McCaffrey, I'd much rather have it twice the odds than Purdy if I was playing that market. So I like that. The Undertaker sent in a pick too, and I'm just going to read out the crux of it. He's also gone McCaffrey. He's playing him to lead all players in rushing yards. He, of course, led the league in rushing yards this season. $3 on 365, and his logic is they're the most likely team to play 3 games. Mind you can play 3 without making the Super Bowl if you're a team playing wildcard weekend. But, San Fran's going to be favourite every game they play. So playing games and winning them well leads to rushing yards. And when you look at the second team in favoritism is the Ravens. That's a committee backfield, and Lamar takes some of those rushing yards. So there's a pretty strong logic there. Now, let me put you on the spot. If you can have a $3 odds, would you rather just play San Fran wins the Super Bowl, or would you rather play McCaffrey leads all players in rushing yards, knowing that you could win that even without San Fran winning the Super Bowl? But you could also get a case where the 49ers win the Super Bowl, but somebody else leads in yards. Do you like one play more than the other?
I would probably go the Super Bowl one personally. Sorry, Matty, but it's only because the defenses that the Niners would have to face to go forward. So let's say that Detroit started to win, they started to climb. They're a really good run defense. Dallas, really good run defense. So I think he'd have some stiff opposition in there, getting to the point, which would be the Super Bowl. But I still like it. I understand it completely. And like I said, I think he can run rampant on this Ravens defense if the Ravens make it.
It's very it's hard to knock it. You know how good he's been this year. But looking in that market, it got me thinking, who else could I take? Pollard, $9. That and you got if Dallas, they're big favorites this week, and then they'd be favorites against Detroit. Of course, if you get the upset and you get into the Super Bowl, then you're playing 4 games. So Pollard $9, or Pacheco $21. Sort of similar logic for KC. He seems to be getting enough carries. But you'd have to be back in that KC would upset, let's say, Buffalo next week and maybe have to upset Baltimore. But what I'm getting at is $21 for Pacheco. The Chiefs are a lot shorter than that to kind of win the Super Bowl. But if they did, you'd feel he would get his fair share of yardage.
I don't mind that one, actually, because that's pretty smart. Because, again, you're coming up against, they could come up against the Ravens, who are weak against the run. You're probably going to get more weather, depending on the geographical thing of the AFC teams in Kansas City. So they're going to be outside. They're possibly going to be running more. That's not a bad one.
I'm glad you like that. Yeah, $21 too. That's fair bet that you could have a flyer on. I mentioned Pollard. The case against him would just be that Dallas favors passing it. So, of course, that's
and he's
why
not
Dak
running that
is the
well.
favorite. Yeah, so that's why Dak is the favorite to lead all players in passing yards. If I had a smoky in that market, I'd go Goff at $13 just because they're playing LA in a dome this week. You play Dallas in a dome, and under that pretense, you've got to beat Dallas, and that could be a shootout. And then if you upset San Fran, you're going to have to throw for a bunch of yards. And even if you lose, you could play from behind and get some yards. And I feel like players can win these markets playing 3. But, of course, especially if you get to play 4, and the 4th game is in LA, which is indoor as well. Got anyone in passing yards that you'd have your eye on?
No, mate. No, I didn't look at that one. Sorry.
What about receiving?
Nope. The one I did look at, actually, no, I lied to you. Yeah, I have most passing yards actually went Mahomes, which contradicts the Pacheco rushing one. $11. I saw that one out.
Yeah, but same concept that the Chiefs are $11 to win the Super Bowl. But if they are going to win it, they're going to win 4 straight games, and Mahomes is going to have to put the team on his back. So The interesting debate is which is the better bet. Like Mahomes could lead if they get to a Super Bowl, he could have the most passing yards. But you'd hate to back Mahomes most yards and they actually win it, but it's with balanced attack and somebody else has more. So it's a toss up. Maybe you play a little on both sides. Receiving, just to cover all bases, I like Amon-Ra St. Brown for similar reasons that I like Goff as a smoky. Of course, CD Lamb is a big favorite there, but St. Brown is a stud too. As I just said, Lions, they're going to need to put up some serious production if they're going to make a run. And I give them a shot. Okay, you're going to like my custom play too, because I've just gone the exacta. Let me put you on the spot. I think we both got the same Super Bowl, and it is chalky. But tell us your Super Bowl and who you're picking to win it.
I do think it's going to be Ravens-Niners again, and I actually think the Niners upset them here. Okay,
well, that's not exactly my tip. I didn't know who you're going to pick in the Super Bowl, but I had an inkling you go Ravens-Niners. My exacta, I'm actually going to go the other way. I'm going to go Ravens over Niners, right? But obviously you can see that's a realistic possibility. And for anyone watching live, and if you catch this tonight, Wednesday night, and if you do catch this on Thursday, jump on Toppy and have a look, because they haven't promised they can keep it up for much longer after tonight because it could get smashed. But tripod exacta under NFL markets, you're going to find Ravens to beat the Niners, and that's at $10 odds. Max, you can have a 50 on that, but 50 to win 500. They are both close to kind of 50-50 shots to make the Super Bowl. We've explained why they're going to be short favorites. I think touchdown or more each game they do play at home, and they've only got to win 2 in a row each to meet in the Super Bowl. And then I think it's close to a 50-50. Like, I'm not going to say because the Ravens handled the Niners on Christmas in San Fran, it means that the Ravens are going to win. I'm not saying that, but I just think given that we've seen that, the Niners aren't going to be much of a favorite over Baltimore, if at all. I know the Niners are a bigger favorite in the overall futures right now, but that's more so because they are a shorter favorite to win their conference than Baltimore. I think if these two meet, it's basically a 50-50. So the way I look at it is like Baltimore's 220 to get out of the AFC, and then they're not going to be any higher than kind of 220 in the Super Bowl if it's against the Niners. So I definitely and sorry, then you got to add in like $1.80 for the Niners to make the Super Bowl. It still gets you under a 1 in 10 shot for me. So that's why I like that one. Would you still play that?
Yeah, I'm going to play it.
There you go. Yeah, that's a good value. And of course, if you get a Niners Ravens Super Bowl, you're set. You know what I mean? If you've got your $50 on that, then you're sitting with $10 on one team. You're still going to get like $1.80 plus on the Niners. And it's not that easy for me to sit here a month before the Super Bowl and say exactly what odds or what line a game will be, because of course form changes, injuries change, but roughly speaking, that's what I predict. And we'll probably hook up again, Neddy, and discuss the Super Bowl in depth and come up with some plays in about a month's time. You've given us your prediction. I'd love to hear. Tom's happy that I've gone the Ravens. I'd love to hear other people's predictions in the comments. That's pretty much all I had for us. I said before I didn't want to dampen your mood going in, but let's just spend a couple of minutes and talk about other stuff going on around the league. Mate, what's doing at the Panthers? Tough year. You've given up the farm for a number 1 pick that hasn't gone that well. The coach is obviously one of the quickest firings in history. I'd like to know who you want next and what do they do next?
I don't know. I know they're really sniffing around the Lions offensive coordinator, the Ben Johnson. They did also go to Slowick, the offensive coordinator for the Texans. And as we know, the Texans were the ones that actually wanted Bryce Young as well. So he might be intrigued to come around. But I have actually heard that there is some rumblings, being Tepper, he is the richest owner in the NFL, that he will just empty the bag and get Bill Belichick down. No mucking around, just wants the big guy down straight out. I don't know how I'd feel about that. I love Bill Belichick. That's outstanding. But I don't know. I really struggle with having defensive-minded head coaches with offensive young rookies. I think there was a lot of people in the ears of Bryce Young. I think he just struggled. Our offense was pathetic. Our owner was pathetic. He's poking it in too much. Like he just involves – I'm sorry, I'm going on around here. He just involves himself too much. You could tell that Frank Reich didn't want Bryce Young. And I said this because CJ Stroud is Frank Reich's type of guy. And I think as soon as the owner intervened and said, no, you're getting Bryce Young, then all of a sudden everything just fucking fell down. We got this guy that we don't want. We can't handle him, yada, yada, yada. And I think Bryce Young's a good player, good enough player. But I've said this over and over again. If you're picking 1-1, you need elite traits. Elite accuracy is what Stroud had. You got Anthony Richardson, who broke everything coming through the combine. And we decided to pick Bryce Young, who was the smallest quarterback in history, the lightest quarterback in history. And then when he goes to the NFL combine, when all these guys were airing it out and throwing and showing off, he didn't even compete. Didn't throw a single pass, just stood there on the sideline. And we picked him. Done.
And don't apologize. I knew this would rile you up, but I thought people would want to hear the truth, the raw truth. And look, it's tough times, but
yeah. My wife says to me, I'm not even kidding. Every Monday, she says to me, she's like, "How did the Panthers go?" I'm like, "They lost. They lost." And she's like, "When are you going to support someone else?" And I was just like, "When they score a touchdown." And the last 2 weeks, they haven't scored one.
I know it's rough, and they lose every week, and your wife says, "Well, at least they're going to get a high draft pick next year, right?" But that
for someone else,
a disaster because it goes to the Chicago Bears. So I want to know, because I think that's a massive off-season topic. What would you do if you were the Bears, who of course own Carolina's pick?
I loved Fields. In my pre-draft thing, he was my number one quarterback for it. But the smartest thing for them to do is to take Caleb Williams. They know that they have a very good team there. And now you reset that salary cap thing. You get a cheap quarterback, rookie deal. That's what you do, man. They've got a hell of a lot of money as well, Chicago. They've proven they can win. I would still sack that coach. He's gone. Eberflus, see you later.
Really?
I'd be
Even
aggressive.
though they finished the season pretty hot.
100%. If I was the owner, I would just go and get someone else, bring someone else in, offensive-minded guys. I used to be of the mind that you go and get a good defensive coach, because that's zigging while everyone else is zagging. But the more I think about it now and the more I see it, you get a good defensive coach and he holds that team together, right? You then have an offensive coordinator and he might be really good and he gets that offense humming. That offensive coordinator is gone. He's poached straight away. Whereas if you at least have a good offensive coordinator who comes in as a head coach and he calls the plays, he can at least stay there. You know what I mean? The defensive guys aren't headhunted as much. You can find other guys around the league, but the offensive coordinators, the good ones, they're not as easy to find.
That would be such a desirable destination for a coach to land. You know, the likes of a Ben Johnson, because that team was basically a playoff caliber team this year once they got it together. You've got all the draft capital coming in. You've got DJ Moore off the Panthers as well. You can have a couple of first-round picks. And if they go that route and they go Caleb Williams, which resets the clock, because as you say, 4 years, fifth-year option for a rookie QB, Fields played so well in the shop window that you're going to get a decent return for trading Fields as well. So you're going to stack your roster even more. But the city loves Fields. I could also see him going the other way, keep him, trade the number one for a king's ransom again, get even more capital, because you're going to get and as we've seen literally in evidence by what happened to your side, sorry to bring it up again, as good as everyone thinks Caleb Williams may be, you don't know. You just don't know all the time with these draft picks. So you give somebody else who gives up everything because everybody wants that dream of a franchise QB. And it could go the other way, or a player could get injured, and suddenly you got even more coming back your way as well. So,
and they're picking number 9 as well. They've got picks at number 1 and number 9. So if they trade that number 1 for Caleb Williams or Drake May, depending on whoever everyone wants, they're going to get a massive haul for this. And then you're just picking at 9. And there's that many good wide receivers there, offensive linemen, defensive linemen.
And in all likelihood, somebody in the top 10 is going to be trading for that pick from you, and they're going to give you theirs. So whoever it is, if it's Atlanta, it's Washington, someone who's desperate, is it New England, whatever, then you're still top 5 pick anyway. And for downgrading a few spots, you're probably getting there first next year and plus much more. So powerful position the Bears have got themselves into. And it's going to be fascinating to watch that unfold. But I love all the off-season stuff, but of course it all happens on the field. So can't wait for the playoffs to begin. Thanks for taking the time, mate, and joining me.
Easy,
I think we might have cut out on Instagram. I don't know if anyone would have jumped across and found us elsewhere. Apparently there's an hour limit. I thought we'd go a solid hour. We've gone beyond, but that's because we had to get these bonus topics in. So Neddy Given Sunday, let the people know. Are you still doing like a wildcard show Sunday? Let people know
definitely. Like sometimes around this time of year, sometimes I contemplate doing it on the Saturday just so I can get it out of the way. But it's just easy to do the Sunday. So they will be shorter shows.
And then
they will be shorter shows because obviously yeah, we're missing the 2 games and stuff like that, but it will continue to be Sunday. I will post about 2 out of 3 ain't bad, and we're not done. We've done really good this year, and we are not done. I promise you that.
Well, thanks to everyone that joined us. Thanks to you. I'll see you, I reckon, in about a month. We'll meet up again to preview the big dance. You heard you got Neddy Given Sunday, typically every Sunday arvo, and that's live on Tripod Facebook page. I also just recorded a chat with Nicole from Wiki that's on the Wiki channel. We talked about the Sunday games Australia time in terms of some specific player prop bets. So go and check that one out if you want even more from me. Thanks, guys. Don't forget the Tripod special pick that is available on Toppy right now. Have a great week. Enjoy the playoffs. Hunt responsibly as always. And Lego.